Hello.
Law offices of James McGill, how may I direct your call?
Yes, thank you. The name is White.
Oh, splendid. Could he meet you in Loyola's Cafe on Central?
How long do you think that would take?
4 o'clock it shall be. Cheers.
Oh, that'd be great. Thank you.
Hey guys, Kiwi here. In this monstrosity of a video, I'll be breaking down the possibility of Walter White and or Jesse Pinkman appearing in the final season for Better Call Saul Season 6. Join me as we discuss possible theories on how or why this could happen, with every section timestamped in the description for you to watch in multiple sittings, or skip around if you so please.
Show me.
I've pretty much skimmed through the entirety of Breaking Bad in order to think of every possibility that we can theorize about.
This is excellent. Very good work.
And I've split them into multiple categories that I will explain in just a moment. Real quick though, I do just want to say that if you're enjoying the content here on the channel, or if you're new here and end up enjoying this video and want to see more like it, hit that subscribe button with notifications on. It'd also be great if you could all help me please the YouTube algorithm with a like on the video if you like what you see, and feel free to leave thoughts and opinions in the comments below, either elaborating about one of the many theories mentioned in this video, or even one of your own. Due to the sheer length of this video, I've made sure to categorize and timestamp every theory accordingly, in case you want to skip around the video or watch in multiple sittings. If one particular theory doesn't pique your interest, be sure to stick around all the way through to the Breaking Bad theories as well, because I've got some really juicy theories I'm genuinely excited to talk about, such as the Ricin Cigarette, Mike vs. Saul, Nacho meeting Jesse, Saul buying his Breaking Bad office, and much more. With the intro out of the way, let's jump right into Walt and Jesse theories. Warning spoilers for Breaking Bad, El Camino, and Better Call Saul up to the Season 5 finale. First, let's start with the basics. Better Call Saul Season 5 is currently taking place in the year 2004, and Breaking Bad starts in 2008. We still have 4 years until the timelines could cross, but keep in mind that it's possible for them to do time jumps during the final season, showing more of 2007 to 2008 leading up to when Breaking Bad starts. We had the biggest Better Call Saul time skip so far in Season 4, Episode 7, Something Stupid, which was about 9 months, and it's possible for them to do even more time skips during Season 6. They also previously did large time skips during the final season of Breaking Bad. Season 5A, Episode 8, Gliding All Over with a 5-month time skip, and Season 5B, Episode 15, Granite Slate, having a 6-month time skip. So I find it likely that they'll do the same for wrapping up the ending to Better Call Saul, along with time skips in between the few final episodes to clear more of the gap between the Better Call Saul and Breaking Bad timelines. A huge debate within the fandom for years has been how close will Better Call Saul get to Breaking Bad in the timeline. It's a big question on whether Better Call Saul will stay separate from Breaking Bad, or if they'll merge together into one seamless story. Honestly, that discussion could take up an entire video on its own, but it's worth keeping in mind. Even if they did keep the Better Call Saul timeline to pre-2008, it's also possible for them to just have a flash forward to the Breaking Bad timeline, which we've already seen during the opening teaser for Better Call Saul episode 405, Quite a Ride. We surprisingly didn't have a Breaking Bad flash forward in Better Call Saul Season 5 like we did for Season 4, which was slightly disappointing, but Season 5 was amazing, so I can't even really complain.
I love it.
That being said, I hope that they will do another Breaking Bad flash forward in Better Call Saul Season 6 somehow, and I have a ton of theories discussing that more in depth later on. Alright, enough rambling. The theories discussed in this video mainly break up into 2 main categories. 1, a prequel cameo during the Better Call Saul 2004 timeline, or number 2, during the Breaking Bad timeline, possibly being a Breaking Bad flash forward, depending on whether or not they actually cross the timelines. Talking about this does in a way give me deja vu because we had the same question with Hank's Better Call Saul cameo going into Season 5 in regards to whether Hank would be in the Better Call Saul or Breaking Bad timeline. As you know, Hank ended up being in the Better Call Saul timeline, which turned out amazing. It showed the true first time that Hank ever met Saul Goodman, how Krazy became a DEA informant for him, among other amazing details. As far as the Walt and Jesse cameo goes, you probably already know that Vince Gilligan will only do it if there's a point. For example, they were going to have a Marie cameo in Better Call Saul Season 2 during that scene when Chuck was in the hospital, but they decided against it as it would have been too distracting for the audience, taking away from the importance of Chuck's condition and diagnosis. Marie was supposed to be the nurse that flipped on the electronic switch at the end of Chuck's bed without him knowing to prove that his condition was all in his head, but they were correct in assuming that the viewers would have been too focused on Marie's cameo to fully pay attention and understand the significance and importance that the scene actually has to Chuck and Jimmy. So if they do a Walt and Jesse cameo, they would have to be the main focus of the scene and not just a side detail. The cameo would also preferably have to serve a meaningful purpose to the current Season 6 story arc at hand, though it's easy to overthink it, which is honestly what we're here for.
Yeah, I suppose you could really overthink something like this.
For example, even though the Hank and Gomi cameos turned out amazing in Season 5 and I loved every second of it, it wasn't completely necessary and they could have done the scenes without them.
Let's get this circle jerk over with.
Hank and Gomez were actually ideas pitched later on, and apparently they were originally just gonna have two random agents interrogate Krazy 8 with Saul instead. So my point is that although Walt and Jesse cameos may not turn out to be completely necessary, I believe that it would still complement whatever situation they end up being involved in, just like how they used Hank and Gomi in Season 5.
Okay, now how can you say no to that? That is a win-win for you guys.
Breaking Bad Season 2 Episode 8 is the first episode that Saul Goodman appears in, and it's literally called Better Call Saul. So keeping that same theme, it would be amazing to mirror that idea and have an episode in Better Call Saul Season 6 titled Breaking Bad, which showcases Walt and Jesse's cameo. This episode could feature a Breaking Bad flash forward, or it could actually be the point in which the two timelines cross over. It would make sense if they would title the episode that crosses over into the Breaking Bad timeline Breaking Bad. And imagine how hyped we'd get if the Season 6 episode titles and synopsis got announced leading up to Season 6 releasing, and one of the episodes was actually titled Breaking Bad. During the Breaking Bad 10-year anniversary event, Walt and Jesse's actors Bryan Cranston and Aaron Paul said multiple times that they'd love to be in Better Call Saul. Vince and the writers also said that they'd love to do it if the actors were down, so in return, the actors agreed that they're willing to reprise their roles and return to work with Vince if he thinks that there's a story to be told. So after the Breaking Bad 10-year anniversary, we went into thinking that we'd definitely see Walt and Jesse in Season 5, but then shortly after, before Season 5 aired, we randomly got confirmation that Walt and Jesse wouldn't be in Season 5. This was initially very confusing, but it turned out it was because they ended up secretly creating El Camino. They liked the idea of bringing Walt and Jesse back so much that they went big and gave Jesse his own movie and included Walt in a flashback scene. This is why Season 5 of Better Call Saul was delayed, and this is why we didn't see Walt or Jesse in Season 5. This took a huge amount of stress off of the actors and creators to have Walt and Jesse return in Better Call Saul due to them being in El Camino. But it's been quite a while since El Camino at this point, and with Better Call Saul Season 6 being the final chance to see them in the show, theories are starting to get hyped up again. It's definitely a question in the back of everyone's mind. For today's discussion, I'll split up the theories into two main categories, but also subsections. The main categories are 1. The Better Call Saul timeline, and 2. The Breaking Bad timeline. We'll be breaking up the Better Call Saul timeline theories into 1. Theories about Walt, and 2. Theories about Jesse. We'll also be breaking up the Breaking Bad timeline theories into 1. Theories with Saul, and 2. Theories without Saul. Without further ado, let's start with the Better Call Saul timeline theories. Since Walt and Jesse weren't criminal partners yet during the Better Call Saul timeline, we'll be discussing them separately. We'll start with Walt and then discuss Jesse afterwards. Unlike Jesse, Walt wasn't involved in the criminal world at all that we know of until 2008 when Breaking Bad starts, so they can't show Walt with any criminals during Better Call Saul or anyone that he wouldn't have known yet. Immediately and directly contradicting what I just said, is it possible that they could give Walt a cameo in Better Call Saul by showing him secretly getting away with something illegal? They could show Walt unintentionally witness a drug deal or any sort of illegal activity where it involves someone getting a large sum of cash for a quick and easy illegal job. This, along with showing Walt in financial troubles, can imply Walt's interest and approval for making quick and easy money, even if it does break the law.
Which was well organized.
Hank, how much money is that?
manufactured
It's about 700 grand. It's a pretty good haul.
As I say, It's a good day for the citizens of El...
We know that Walt became interested in the profits of cooking and selling meth after Hank's huge drug bust in the first Breaking Bad episode, resulting in Walt requesting for a ride-along. But is that truly the first time that Walt has ever thought of doing something illegal to make some quick and easy money? The fact that he gets cancer is what pressures him with a reason to actually do it, but it's possible that he had many thoughts about it in the past as well. Walt's cancer diagnosis was definitely the final straw in regards to motivating him to finally become a criminal, but before the diagnosis he was still short on cash, which is why he got his second job at the car wash. If we saw Walt during the Better Call Saul timeline, I could see it as a stepping stone towards the breaking point. If Walt saw someone make some quick easy money illegally when meanwhile he's slaving away at the car wash, it could really motivate him and make him envious that he can't do the same. For the sake of clarification, I'm not saying give a big revelation of Walt's pre-Breaking Bad. Walt has always abided by the rules his entire life, and he didn't break out of his shell until 2008. If they showed Walt doing something crazy illegal pre-2008, it could be out of character or undermine everything we already know. We don't want to mess up the canon. Considering what we know about Walt's character progression, it would have to be something small and realistic that could fit into the current canon. When retconning for the prequel show, the creators are very careful in making sure that whatever they do in Better Call Saul must flow naturally into Breaking Bad. I believe they even have an employee who watches through the entirety of Breaking Bad and Better Call Saul up to where they currently are before they start writing out every season, and then afterwards just to make sure that everything is consistent with the timeline and that there aren't any lore-breaking plot holes. That's why if we did see Walt doing something criminal pre-2008, it should be something small scale. Maybe he doesn't actually do anything and just considers it. I'd like to see a little crack in his otherwise defeated and unappreciated life. It would act as a small addition to the character, but not something totally changing the outlook of him or undermining his overall story arc in Breaking Bad.
Unusual, isn't it? That kind of cash?
Well, it's not the most we ever took. It's easy money. Till we catch you.
As you may know, Walt got his side job at the car wash in 2004 to help make ends meet, which is the same year as Better Call Saul Season 5, so it's possible to show Walt working as his then new job at the car wash, or even see him getting hired. It'd be funny to see Walt sitting there with his resume waiting for an interview or something. Showing Walt at the car wash is probably the only realistic Better Call Saul timeline option that we currently know of. It's definitely the first thing that people think of, and I've seen countless comments about it. That being said, what would be the point here? Even if it's a cameo just for the sake of it, they still want to write it to be important to the plot somehow. Combining these first two theories, Walt could witness some sort of criminal activity while working at the car wash, or he can even be tempted to do something illegal himself. In Breaking Bad, Saul tells Walt that he's been to the A1A car wash before and complains about how they'd always leave air fresheners in his car after he'd asked them not to give him any. The way that he said it didn't seem like he remembered Walt working there in particular, just that he's been there before in general.
I worked here for 4 years.
Wax on, wax off. Was that you? Hey, how come you guys always give with the air freshener? Huh? I explicitly say I want no air freshener, and every time I drive away smelling like an Alpine whorehouse.
So, if Saul ever did see Walt there, it wasn't a memorable experience, and if we saw it for a Better Call Saul cameo, they'd have to play it off as if they were total strangers because it's before they truly meet in Breaking Bad Season 2, meaning they wouldn't have any reason to recognize each other. It's also possible that someone from the Breaking Bad cast other than Saul could go to the car wash and have some sort of interaction with Walt, along with maybe even Bogdan. It'd be interesting to see a character that Walt never meets during Breaking Bad go to the car wash and strike a conversation with him, such as Lalo or Nacho, for example. I mean, imagine seeing Walter White have a conversation with Lalo Salamanca. That'd be crazy. Or even Nacho Varga. I would love that. I would totally fanboy over something like that, even if it doesn't really make sense.
Bogdan, as is.
Seeing Walt in Better Call Saul is one thing, but Skylar and Walt Jr. is another. It doesn't seem too likely, but not impossible. Remember that we did just see Hank in Better Call Saul Season 5, and Marie was originally supposed to cameo in Season 2. It'd definitely be a surprise, that's for sure. They could elaborate more on just how unfulfilled and tired Walt already was with his life. He could seem very unmotivated, unhappy, and overall just feel like a failure in life. They could show him getting pushed around somehow, either in front of Skylar or by her. Or Or take it in the complete opposite direction and show Walt and Skylar happy together. Have them show how much potential their marriage had for them to live as a happy little family. It'd be nice to throw in a few interesting things that we didn't already know, but regardless, it would definitely add some more emphasis to Walt's midlife crisis that causes him to break bad. They could show Walt and Skylar either out in public doing some sort of daily task like grocery shopping, or even show them with a young Walt Jr. It would be pre-Holly pregnancy, so Skylar wouldn't have a pregnant belly like she did in the first season of Breaking Bad. Walt Jr. would only be about 11 or 12 years old in 2004, so they'd probably just want to mention his name and his age instead of actually having to recast someone as him. For the most part, I figure that if Walt is shown in Better Call Saul pre-2008, he'd just be an innocent, boring chemistry teacher, unless they wanted to spin it somehow where maybe it taunts or lures Walt into the idea of criminal activity.
The shit I cook is the bomb, so don't be telling me.
Shit you cook is shit. I saw your setup. Ridiculous.
No, chili peas, my signature.
Not anymore.
Unlike Walt, Jesse was involved in the criminal world pre-Breaking Bad, cooking and selling meth. The timeline says that Jesse was born in 1984 and that he graduated high school in 2002, which would make sense because he would be about 18 at the time. This means that Jesse would be 20 in 2004 and finally 24 when Breaking Bad starts. Jesse pre-Breaking Bad is the only area that we haven't explored him in, and there's quite a few different possibilities that we could see unfold in Better Call Saul Season 6. Instead of getting a legitimate job working 9 to 5, Jesse teamed up with his lifelong friend Emilio, that he's known since elementary school, to cook and sell meth. As you may know, Emilio is Krazy 8's cousin, and they're the first two antagonists during the first few episodes of Breaking Bad. We could see Jesse and Emilio in the final season of Better Call Saul through Krazy 8, who has already been on Better Call Saul many times. In Breaking Bad, the reason why Jesse tries convincing Walt to hire Saul as their lawyer in the first place is because Saul helped out Emilio multiple times in the past.
Okay, this dude got Emilio off like twice. Okay, both times they had him dead to rights, yo, and then poof. Dude's like Houdini.
That being said, I don't think Jesse has ever met Saul pre-Breaking Bad, so how exactly did Saul help out Emilio? Also, how many times has Saul helped out Emilio in general? We assume that Saul helped Emilio at least once prior to the events of Breaking Bad, but we can also assume that Saul must have helped out Emilio behind the scenes during the first episode of Breaking Bad as well, which is how Krazy 8 surprised Jesse that Emilio was bailed out. It's very possible that we could see the first time Saul helps out Emilio during Better Call Saul Season 6 through Krazy 8. They could either keep it as a surprise reveal, or they could show Emilio getting introduced early into Better Call Saul Season 6 through Krazy 8, and then when Emilio inevitably gets into trouble, Krazy 8 can refer him to Saul, since Saul helped out Krazy 8 a bunch in Season 5 with Hank and Gomi. What would make it even more interesting is if Krazy 8 ratted out Emilio to Hank and Gomi just to get Saul hired to defend Emilio. We know that it was Krazy 8 who ratted out Jesse and Emilio during the first episode of Breaking Bad. That was when Walt was on his drive along, so it's entirely possible that Krazy 8 set up Emilio in the past as well, which means that in Breaking Bad episode 1, it wouldn't have been the first time that Krazy 8 ratted out Emilio. So I'd love to see more of that because I think it's really interesting how the prequel show emphasizes what happens in the main show. In Better Call Saul, we learn that Nacho was close family friends with Krazy 8.
Your friend, Krazy 8?
Yeah, Domingo. I know him a long time. How? My family knows his family.
So it's possible that Jesse and Nacho may have heard of each other, or that they've even met each other in the past through Emilio and Krazy 8. Although it's unlikely, I'd love to see a scene with Nacho and Jesse together. That would be amazing. I love this idea so much I'd do an entire video on it if I wasn't already mentioning it here, but you can bet that I'll do an entire video on it if it actually ever happens. In many ways, Nacho is considered to be the Jesse of Better Call Saul, so I'd love to see a canon scene of these two characters directly interacting with each other at some point. You take any of the previous theories, including Krazy 8, Emilio, and Jesse, but then somehow include Nacho in the situation as well since he's in Krazy 8's circle. It'd be interesting to see Kim take on a young Jesse Pinkman as a pro bono client. I'm not sure if Jesse has ever struggled with any legal troubles himself prior to Breaking Bad, or if he just knows of friends who have, such as Emilio. Also, if Jesse did have legal troubles in the past, he probably would have just went through with Saul Goodman. That being said, there's a chance that he might have not had the money to hire Saul, meaning he'd have to get someone like Kim to represent him. We could also see Badger and or Skinny Pete cameo with Jesse. They were both in El Camino, and we know that if their actors were asked to come back again, they'd do it in a heartbeat. That being said, I'm not sure if they could realistically de-age the actors to look young enough. In a recent interview, Skinny Pete's actor mentioned that he'd love to do a Better Call Saul cameo, but that they haven't called him for anything. And when Skinny Pete did this interview, it was around the time that Tom Schnoz tweeted that they just finished episode 7 of season 6. That concludes the Better Call Saul prequel theories, and now onto the Breaking Bad timeline theories. Due to there being so many theories in the Breaking Bad timeline, I've broken them up into 2 categories: theories that involve Saul and theories that don't. There weren't really any Saul theories during the Better Call Saul timeline because Saul didn't know Walt or Jesse yet, but for the Breaking Bad timeline, that's a different story.
So if you want to make more money and keep the money that you make, better call Saul.
Since Saul is so important in Breaking Bad and also the main character of Better Call Saul, it makes sense that he'd be included if they did another flash forward to the Breaking Bad timeline in season 6, especially if it includes Walt and Jesse. We'll first be discussing all the theories with Saul, and then afterwards we'll be discussing the ones without him. For the Breaking Bad flash forward, if they did a play on a well-known scene or situation from Breaking Bad, we'd want more substance from it. We wouldn't just want to reenact the same scene over again, we'd want to see an extended version of it either from the beginning or after the end. They did this in El Camino with Breaking Bad flashbacks with Jesse, with Mike, Jane, and even Walt. All those flashbacks supposedly happened in between certain scenes within existing episodes of Breaking Bad, and they called them missing scenes. There's multiple kinds of missing scenes, ones that happen in between episodes, or others that happen right in the middle of an episode that's meant to be fit in between 2 scenes. I'm pretty sure that the flashback in El Camino of Jesse and Jane is meant to be in between episodes because it's when they actually go to that art gallery, something that they always said they wanted to do, but we never actually got to see on screen. This would be a missing scene that fits in after the episode or in between episodes. And an example of a missing scene that fits into the middle of an episode would be the opening scene to El Camino. It's a missing scene of Jesse and Mike talking about quitting the game. This flashback happens in the middle of Breaking Bad season 5, the episode Buyout, and it would fit in right about at the 20-minute mark into the episode, right after Jesse leaves Walt to continue cooking alone. Jesse is distraught over Todd shooting the child during the train heist, and he's also bothered by the fact that Walt doesn't seem to be fazed by it, considering that Walt's happily whistling. He gets a mysterious call, then the episode cuts to later that night when Walt shows up to their office, surprised by Mike and Jesse telling him that they want to buy out their shares of the business and quit. Mike and Jesse quitting on Walt was meant to be a surprise to the audience during Breaking Bad, but then in El Camino for the missing scene, we actually see Jesse and Mike talking about it. This implies that it was Mike that called Jesse right as he was leaving Walt.
Hey. Yeah, I was just leaving. All right. You know he's not going to be happy.
No, I suspect he won't.
So what's going on?
And I've already decided. I'm out.
So wait, I'm out too.
Walt and Jesse's missing scene in El Camino was a flashback to the Breaking Bad Season 2 episode 4 Days Out, where Walt and Jesse trapped themselves out in the desert.
What shall we use to conduct this beautiful current with? Wire. Copper.
I'd love to see more of these Breaking Bad missing scenes in Better Call Saul Season 6. It'd be nice to have something from another perspective, something that happened behind the scenes. A lot of these theories involve Saul in his office, since that's where we mainly see him during Breaking Bad. They already did a Breaking Bad flash forward in Better Call Saul episode 405, with Saul and Francesca at Saul's Breaking Bad office, so it's likely that they could film there again since they still have the office intact. They've done it once in season 4, and they can do it again, but this time maybe with more important characters such as Walt and Jesse. No offense, Francesca.
Yep.
Not only can they do it again, but they can do it better this time by even showing the outside parking lot of Saul's office. That includes the classic Better Call Saul sign, along with his mini blow-up Statue of Liberty. I'd like to see Saul buy his office during the Better Call Saul timeline in Season 6, and then have a Breaking Bad flash forward to him in his office with Walt and Jesse in the same episode. Now, just as a side note, this theory may not age particularly well during the first half season to Season 6, because we already know that Saul buys his office and that Statue of Liberty blow up within the first episode or two. That being said, they could still do this, but then have a Breaking Bad flash forward just not be in the same episode. And the episode could be named Breaking Bad. There's gotta be at least one episode in Season 6 titled Breaking Bad, and if there isn't, I'm gonna consider it a very large missed opportunity. When Walt first goes to speak to Saul on Badger's behalf, he calls himself Mr. Mayhew, as Badger's full name is Brandon Mayhew. We first see Walt in disguise waiting for his appointment with Saul in the Breaking Bad waiting room. It's a popular theory to have the Better Call Saul timeline end with Walt walking into Saul's office as Mr. Mayhew. This is where Saul's character truly began, and it'd be satisfying to have the timeline sync up with Saul's first Breaking Bad appearance, even if it's just for a scene. I don't think we ever saw who Saul was speaking to in Season 2 Episode 8 before Walt first walked in, so what if Saul's client before Walt was a person of significance in regards to the Better Call Saul story? We could have a Breaking Bad flash forward scene that starts with Saul speaking to, I don't know, let's say Nacho in his office or something nuts like that. Then as Nacho leaves, Walt walks in as Mr. Mayhew, and it's revealed when exactly in the timeline the scene is taking place. To add to this, if Nacho's involved here, it could also play into the "it wasn't me, it was Ignacio" theory, because Saul says this famous line later that same night when Walt and Jesse kidnap Saul and take him out to the desert after Saul declined Mr. Mayhew's offer. It's possible that whatever Nacho and Saul were hypothetically talking about before Walt walks in as Mr. Mayhew, it could be the reason why Saul had Nacho and Lalo on his mind when Jesse and Walt kidnapped him. I do think that we're gonna get some sort of answer to the Breaking Bad line "it wasn't me, it was Ignacio" during Better Call Saul Season 6, and it'd be crazy if it was during a missing scene. In Season 3 of Breaking Bad, Saul Goodman starts up a class action lawsuit for victims of Wayfare 515. It's possible that Saul gained a great deal of publicity from representing victims, so we could see that play out more in Better Call Saul. Walt was partly the cause of the planes colliding, but he doesn't want to admit it and refuses to feel any guilt or remorse from it. We could see a scene where Walt opens up about this to Saul in his office. Maybe Walt barges in while Saul deals with a victim. Wayfare 515 was a huge deal in Breaking Bad, so it'd be interesting to see it somehow incorporated into Better Call Saul. A flash forward could start with Saul talking on the phone to Walt or Jesse, and then even have Walt and or Jesse meet with him afterwards. A Breaking Bad flash forward scene would start with Saul talking on the phone either in his car or in his office, but it doesn't reveal at first who he's talking to. There's multiple ways how they could reveal this depending on where Saul is during the phone call. If Saul is driving in the car talking on the phone, they could have him say "be there in a second," followed by Saul arriving at his office to find Walt and Jesse already there waiting for him. Or if Saul is already at his office, we could see him on the phone saying something along the lines of "no, don't come here" or "don't come in," just to see Walt and or Jesse barging in with Francesca yelling at them. For example, during Breaking Bad Season 4, there's a scene where Walt is frantically weaving through traffic while on the phone with Saul. I think it'd be really cool to see the phone call from Saul's point of view in his office, followed by whatever else he's up to at the time. Who knows, maybe something with Nacho? Yes, I will try to shoehorn Nacho into any of these theories when possible. Anyways, it doesn't just have to be that one moment I mentioned of Walt driving frantically. It could be any time that we've seen Walt or Jesse call Saul over the phone, or they could just retcon a situation where it happened off screen during the original Breaking Bad story, creating one of those missing scenes we've talked about. Even if they couldn't get Bryan Cranston or Aaron Paul to cameo as Walt or Jesse, they could still get one of them to read lines for a phone call, or even repurpose the original lines from Breaking Bad and show Saul on the phone with one of them. Moving on, I'd like to discuss the infamous Ricin Cigarette from Breaking Bad. It'd be interesting to get a missing scene of Walt and Saul planning to steal the Ricin Cigarette off of Jesse, which would have to be at some point during Season 4. Now, during the Season 5 premiere, Saul implies that Huell lifted the Ricin Cigarette off of Jesse, something that Jesse doesn't realize until much later in the season, becoming a huge turning point for him against Saul and Walt. I'd like to see this missing scene of Walt and Saul planning this. They could show Walt initially showing up at Saul's office to tell him to get Huell to lift the Ricin Cigarette. Have Walt get Saul to agree to do this, but without telling Saul the truth, which is that he wants the Ricin in order to poison Brock so that he can manipulate Jesse into hating Gus. Not only that, but we could also see Huell actually pulling it off. It could be a similar scene to Huell planting the phone battery in Chuck's pocket from Better Call Saul Season 3. It just seems like a perfect opportunity. Another cameo possibility could be during Breaking Bad Season 5 and includes Saul trying to convince Walt to quit the meth business with Walt retaliating. We saw everyone try to convince Walt to quit at one point or another, with the biggest two moments that stand out to me being when Jesse tries talking to him at his house, along with Saul talking to both of them at his office.
Does that seem like an acceptable stopping point to you?
Jesse's scene is the infamous Empire business scene, while Saul's scene is known for one of the only times that he broke his Goodman character in Breaking Bad to give some genuine advice. I'd rather leave the Empire business scene alone because it's just amazing, don't fix what isn't broke, but instead have an elaboration from the episode Magical, where Walt tells Saul that he's broke, saying how it isn't a good stopping point.
Jesse, you asked me if I was in the meth business or the money business. Neither. I'm in the Empire business.
If they ever wanted to bring in a supporting character as a cameo alongside Walt that's not Jesse, it's possible to have a Walt and Skylar cameo instead. Either have them talk to Saul in his office or have Saul appear at their home. This could be any time during Breaking Bad, but preferably after Walt introduced Skylar to Saul. Who knows, maybe we could get some sort of elaboration on Ice Station Zebra as well, and maybe we can actually see Kim during Breaking Bad in this moment. Now at first it might seem a bit odd to have a Skylar cameo, but we already talked about this once in the video. They were going to have a Marie cameo in Season 2 of Better Call Saul, and they showed Hank in Season 5 of Better Call Saul, so it's very possible for them to have a Skylar cameo in Season 6. Although Saul's office is a popular choice for a location, they could also do a cameo in the desert as well. It'd be nice to see another classic Breaking Bad desert scene out in the middle of nowhere.
Goddamn right.
The show creators know that we love desert scenes in Breaking Bad and Better Call Saul, and that's why they started off Better Call Saul with the 2 episodes of Tuco and Nacho dragging Saul out to the desert. This is also why, arguably the best episode of Better Call Saul Bagman is Saul and Mike out in the desert trying to get back. If they wanted to do a smaller scale situation, they could just do something such as the time in Breaking Bad where Walt, Jesse, and Saul meet up during Season 5 in order for Walt to try and convince Jesse to leave town. This is right before Jesse figures out that the Ricin Cigarette was lifted off of him. Since it would be difficult to show a scene during the early seasons of Breaking Bad due to the actors aging, it makes sense that they would do a scene from Seasons 4 to 5 of Breaking Bad instead. I'd like to see more of why Saul and Mike hate each other so much during Breaking Bad. Saul and Mike never really got along in Better Call Saul, but after everything they've been through from Better Call Saul Season 1 all the way through Season 5, it turns out that they're a lot closer than we originally knew while watching Breaking Bad. I know that Saul and Mike got off on the wrong foot, or finger, in that Mike never even really liked Saul, but tolerates him as a business associate. But after Mike drags Saul through the desert in Season 5 of Better Call Saul, they've bonded quite a bit, even though they didn't really want to. Since Mike and Saul have been the 2 main Breaking Bad characters in Better Call Saul since the prequel was created, it makes sense that there would be a missing scene focusing on their relationship in Breaking Bad. Considering the amount of years that they've known each other by the time Breaking Bad happens, it's possible that they're just sick of each other. But I feel like there's another reason why Mike and Saul have this sort of new hatred towards each other that never existed in Better Call Saul to the extent that it does in Breaking Bad. You think after everything they've been been through in Better Call Saul, they'd grow to like each other more, not less, right? To see them so distraught at each other during Breaking Bad must really mean that something else happened between them. Maybe Mike just slowly but surely gets sick of Saul throughout the years, but I wonder if something in particular separates them more by the end of Better Call Saul Season 6. Maybe something can happen between Saul and Mike during Season 6, causing Saul to reference it during a Breaking Bad flash forward missing scene. We know that in Breaking Bad, Mike threatened to break Saul's legs, which is why Saul didn't want to work with Mike during Season 5 of Breaking Bad, but I believe there's more to it. Saul and Mike's relationship in Breaking Bad is a huge contrast to how close they seem to be during the first 5 seasons of Better Call Saul. We could see more of Saul setting up Walt's initial meeting with Gus. It seems as though Saul still hasn't fully met Gus even during Breaking Bad, and instead goes through Mike. As you know, the famous line that people usually reference in order to get people into Breaking Bad, "I know a guy who knows a guy," and you actually meet the guy in the middle. I'd like to see how Saul manages to set up the meeting, along with how he found out that the connection was there but decided to not sit down with Walt. I'd assume that it'd be a scene in Saul's office where he's preoccupied with something else, maybe related to Better Call Saul, but then him setting up Walt's meeting with Gus can be intertwined within the scene. It could even be as simple as a phone call. We could see Saul contact Mike and then Mike speak to Gus about it for the very first time around Breaking Bad Season 2 Episode 11, which is Gus's first episode. Mike, however, doesn't show up until Season 2 Episode 13, so it'd be interesting to see Mike during the Breaking Bad timeline before he was ever revealed on screen for the first time in Breaking Bad, which is when he was cleaning up that whole mess with the Jesse situation with Jane ODing. Since we already saw a flash forward of Saul packing up his Breaking Bad office and calling Ed to disappear, it's likely we'll get another flash forward to right afterwards. The Better Call Saul 4 or 5 Breaking Bad flash forward could be counted as a Breaking Bad missing scene that happens in between episodes right before Granite Slate. They could do another missing scene, but instead have this one be one that would be in the middle of the episode between 2 scenes. During the Breaking Bad episode, Granite Slate, we see Ed show Saul his new roommate on a security cam, and then the show cuts back to them already in the room together. The flash forward would happen right when Saul walks into the room where Walt is, since we didn't actually see that on Breaking Bad. We'd get a conversation between them that could consist of more possible closure between the 2 characters that we haven't already seen, leading into the Breaking Bad scene where Saul tells Walt off and walks away after Walt starts coughing violently. Next up, what I'm about to say is a popular enough theory that it does deserve to be briefly mentioned, even if it probably won't happen. Saul and Jesse are 2 of the only known runaway survivors from the events of Better Call Saul and Breaking Bad, so it's possible that they may reunite again. How or why, I couldn't tell you. Realistically, it'd be smart for them to never meet again, especially considering they're both hiding in different states. But since Jesse in El Camino and Saul as Gene Takovic are the only post-Breaking Bad moments that we've truly ever seen, it makes sense that people would theorize for them to somehow team up. But to be honest, that's about as realistic as saying that Jesse and Nacho will somehow team up post-Breaking Bad. Jesse's starting his new life in Alaska and has absolutely no relation or connection to Gene's current situation, especially going into Season 6 of Better Call Saul. It doesn't really make sense that Gene would reach out to Jesse if he even knows how to, considering that Jesse doesn't actually disappear until long after Saul does. Saul doesn't even know anything about Jesse's whereabouts. I can't think of any realistic reason as to why Jesse would track down Gene. So as cool as it would be, I'm sort of at a loss as to how this could realistically happen. The next handful of theories involve Breaking Bad situations without Saul. Although Saul is the main key to Better Call Saul, he's not the only connective tissue that could tie in Breaking Bad flash forwards. So here's a few theories that I thought about which wouldn't have any real reason to include Saul. Instead of focusing on Saul's side of things, it could be significant to the cartel side of the story, since that is really what the other half of Better Call Saul is all about. This includes the Salamancas, Gus, and even Mike. They could have a scene that involves any number of these characters, but also include Walt and or Jesse for a cameo. This next theory is just really an elaboration on the Krazy 8 Emilio talk that we had during the Better Call Saul timeline in regards to a prequel Jesse Pinkman, except this time we're discussing it in regards to an actual drug bust that we see at the beginning of Breaking Bad. This would show an elaboration of Hank's team busting Emilio, with Jesse having enough luck to be able to escape due to timing. Since this situation involves Hank, Gomi, Walt, Jesse, and Emilio, you could have any combination of these characters in the cameo. Since Hank and Gomi were already in Better Call Saul Season 5, it's likely we could see them again in Season 6, but with Walt with them. Also, since we know that Krazy 8 is Hank's informant, that's the key detail that'd be the connection to introduce this entire situation, including Emilio and Jesse showing more of a background on their partnership and meth business pre-Walt. Since they spent so much time preparing and building the Superlab in Better Call Saul, they could use a flash forward with the Superlab at some point during the Breaking Bad timeline in order to actually show a completed version of it in Better Call Saul itself. This could tie together and make all the time spent on it during Season 4 more worth it. Not only could we see a Superlab missing scene with Walt and or Jesse, it's a perfect excuse to give Gale another cameo as well. Walt's first successful deal with Gus. Breaking Bad Season 2 Episode 11 Mandela ends with Walt driving off to the deal, and Season 2 Episode 12 Phoenix starts with Walt putting away the money and going back to the hospital to be with Skylar and his new baby. Between Season 2 Episode 11 and Season 2 Episode 12, we never actually saw Walt make his first deal with Gus that he had to miss the birth of his second child for. At the time, it did add to the show by purposely making the audience miss this meeting, similar to how Jesse missed it because he was too high, along with how Walt missed his second child being born. It just added a lot more suspense, and I do love how it was done in Breaking Bad. But now that we're considering missing scenes, this could be the perfect opportunity for one. I'd like to see a Breaking Bad flash forward of this deal actually take place, and it'd probably become one of my favorite missing scenes. The potential is huge to show Walt and Gus' first ever big successful deal, something that's canon to the series but originally happened off screen. Out of all the theories in this video, if I was doing a tier list, I'd put this one right up at the top, right next to the Ricin Cigarette theory. There's been multiple times during Breaking Bad where Mike has saved the lives of Walt and Jesse, sometimes without them ever being aware. The biggest example that comes to mind is the iconic moment where Mike got Gus to call off the Salamanca twins, who were there waiting to murder Walt when he got out of the shower of his home. I pretty much would like to see something to that effect, but in regards to a different situation that happens in Breaking Bad. We could also possibly see more of Mike spying on Walt and Jesse and see other things that he's done behind the scenes. The next theory is that Better Call Saul will end with the scene of Walt getting his cancer diagnosis, syncing up the two Better Call Saul and Breaking Bad timelines, and I'm including this simply due to how popular it is. Now, as cool as some popular theories like this initially are, there isn't really much substance to them other than the initial shock. It's just a reveal for the sake of it. It'd be cool for half a second until you realize how pointless it is. Walt hasn't been in Better Call Saul at all, so it'd be strange to have the ending revolve around him. Better Call Saul has grown over the years, and it's proven itself to be capable of standing on its own two legs. If you can think of a way to elaborate on the idea, please feel free to. What if the missing scene was something as simple as Walt having a barbecue at his home? It'd be a good excuse to have a bunch of the Breaking Bad cast all cameo at once. I doubt Walt or Skylar would invite people like Jesse or Saul, especially if Hank and Marie were there, so I'm not entirely sure on the combination of characters. It could just purely be Walt's close family with Walt, Skylar, Hank, Maria, and Walt Jr., which is why I put this in the category without Saul. I'm not sure exactly how it would tie into the story though. Why would we need to see this? I keep coming back to this issue throughout all the theories. Why is it necessary and why is it relevant? It's fun to think of an interesting cameo idea, but it can become frustrating to figure out how it can serve a purpose. I imagine the scene starting with a normal gathering at Walt's house, but then something crashes the party, such as Mike, Gus, or Saul calling Walt, informing him of something crucial that needs to be taken care of immediately. Or someone could unexpectedly arrive at Walt's house, causing him to leave suddenly. While creating previous seasons of Breaking Bad and Better Call Saul, the writers knew that they could usually just push off plot lines or solutions until a future season, but when it's the final season, they're understandably stressed to conclude as much as possible. Not only is Better Call Saul Season 6 the final season of the show, it's possibly the final season of the Breaking Bad universe ever, with only one season left. Even with 3 extra episodes, there's not enough time to wrap up and do absolutely everything that they want to do, or everything that we, the audience, would want to see. There's still so much to wrap up for all the Better Call Saul characters, such as Nacho, Lalo, and Kim, even Howard, and then there's all the Breaking Bad characters, such as, Gus, Mike, Saul, etc., along with connecting Better Call Saul to Breaking Bad, and even the post-Breaking Bad Gene timeline too. With all this under their belt to conclude within 13 episodes, will they even have time to fit in a Walt and Jesse cameo? Although having the cameo be related to the immediate story is preferable, it's not completely necessary. The Better Call Saul 405 missing scene shows Saul packing up his Breaking Bad office, and as amazing as it was to see, it wasn't directly related to the Better Call Saul story, especially during Season 4, but it was instead related to the overall idea of the show in general, of Saul running away to hide as Gene, this new identity that we keep seeing at the beginning of each season. So in a way, it helps give context to the story of the show for just Better Call Saul itself, even though it is directly related to Breaking Bad and happens during that timeline. If there was a Walt and Jesse cameo, or a missing scene that includes them, I feel like it could be related in a similar way. Also, will a Walt and or Jesse cameo in Better Call Saul even look realistic due to the actor's aging? I do think that if we see another Breaking Bad missing scene, it'll take place during Breaking Bad Season 5. It'd be difficult to show a missing scene from an earlier season of Breaking Bad since the actors have aged so much. Instead of trying to de-age the actors more than they already do for Better Call Saul, not to say that they haven't aged well, but Breaking Bad is so many years old and Better Call Saul is supposed to be so many years before Breaking Bad, so it can just be a little bit immersion breaking. As good of a job as they do on Better Call Saul, it can already be immersion breaking, so you just have to try and tread the line there. It'd be more realistic if they just set the missing scene to be Breaking Bad Season 5. Not only are there 2 major time skips in Breaking Bad Season 5, but there's also a lot of episodes in Season 5 that cover about 1 to 2 weeks worth of time. These mini time skips sporadically throughout each episode gives the creators a lot of leeway for adding in missing scenes. The first Breaking Bad flash forward that we saw in Better Call Saul 405 was already said during Breaking Bad Season 5. So they've done it once before, which makes it likely that they may do it again. Breaking Bad Season 5 is obviously when a ton of crazy shit happens leading up to the finale of the show, so it makes sense that they chose this time period for their 405 flash forward. Likewise, it makes sense that they could choose this again. Not to mention the fact that Bryan Cranston would probably want to wear a bald cap again like in El Camino. It's hard to imagine this universe coming to an end without the 2 characters who started it all, but at the same time I can't see a scenario where it doesn't overshadow Better Call Saul itself. But of course this is just nitpicking. Even though Better Call Saul stands on its own 2 legs, and it's true that it doesn't need a Walt or Jesse cameo, it'd be a nice bonus for the fans, and honestly if we don't see them by the time Season 6 ends for Better Call Saul, I'll definitely consider it somewhat of a missed opportunity. I know a lot of people are somewhat against it because they think it'll come off as forced fan service, but as we've said multiple times in the video, if they have a good idea, they'll run with it, but if not, they might just steer clear of it. What's more is that Vince was in the writer's room for Season 6 and he's more involved with the final season of Better Call Saul, which makes a Walt and Jesse appearance just seem that much more likely. It's possible that the final season of Better Call Saul will have a quicker passage of time, similar to the final season of Breaking Bad. There's a million ways that they can take the timeline for the final season, both in the past, present, and future of Better Call Saul and Breaking Bad. Walt and Jesse are crucial to the reason why Salt is hiding his gene, and I do think that they'll elaborate on that more than what we just saw in the 405 flash forward. Thanks for watching the video all the way through to the outro, I really appreciate it. Feel free to go wild with this one in the comments below, elaborating on anything from the video, along with your own theories as well. Once Better Call Saul Season 6 airs, I will be doing a follow-up video regarding whether or not Walt and Jesse showed up, and also more regular length content will be coming soon, and I'll try to work on more long-form content in the background as well. As always, I'd appreciate a like on the video if you've enjoyed anything that I've said today. It'd really help out with the YouTube algorithm to share this video with more Better Call Saul and Breaking Bad fans. If you're new to the channel or just haven't yet already, subscribe and hit that bell notification to stay updated on when I post new content on Better Call Saul and Breaking Bad. I thank you all so much for watching, and until next time, I'll talk to you guys later. Peace out.
I'll keep that in mind.
I think we're done for today.
That's it?
That's it.